Welcome back, my friends. My name is Sarah. I am known as Carnivore Yogi. Thank you so much for being here and watching today's video. Today, I have an interview with Marty Kendall, who is an engineer and a multi-time author. I'm going to put all of his information in the information section below for you guys. He's also the creator of Data-Driven Fasting, which there will also be a link below for that. Now, I just completed a month of data-driven fasting in June and loved it so much and found it to be such an intuitive way to do fasting, if that's something that you want to do, that I really wanted to bring Marty on to talk. We also dove into his book, Big Fat Keto Lies, which I'll be honest with you guys, I don't agree with everything, and I am personally back to a ketogenic way of eating. So I am now more so trying to focus on being ketogenic. However, I was able to lose 6 pounds during his data-driven fasting, the month of that, and I learned a lot. I was also able to significantly lower my blood glucose, and I'm still using a lot of those same principles now. So I really do hope that you guys enjoy this conversation. I do want to thank ForCare, who is this little meter here, for sponsoring today's video. This is the meter that I have been using. I actually had a Keto Mojo, the old Keto Mojo, and it was great. And a lot of you guys probably know that are in this space, they discontinued the old one and kind of forced you to buy the new one. When I bought the new one, I just have had nothing but trouble with it. My readings are all over the place. They're anywhere from the 130s to the 60s. They just don't really make sense. So when ForCare reached out to me and asked me if I would like to try their meter, I was more than happy to do that. They test blood glucose, ketones, and you can also test your uric acid as well as your cholesterol with this meter, which is super cool. So you can use my code Yogi to save on your ForCare meter. They also have a Canada shop. Now, my code will not work in Canada, but you can use it in the US if you're in the USA. So thank you, ForCare, for sending me this meter. I am using it almost on a daily basis now that I am still kind of implementing some of the strategies I learned from Marty. So that's enough talking for me. Let's jump into this interview. I hope you guys enjoy it. Please leave your questions in the comments below, and I will see you in the next video. Bye. All right, you guys, thank you so much for coming back and tuning in. I have a wonderful guest today. I'm so excited because I've been listening to his YouTube channel and his podcast, and I've just finished a month of data-driven fasting. So I'm really excited to talk with him today, selfishly for myself, but I think that a lot of what we say will resonate with you all as well. Introduce you guys to Marty Kendall. Thank you for being here.
Oh, absolute pleasure. Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah. If you wouldn't mind just briefly, I know you're an engineer, but just kind of talk a little bit how you got to where you are now in the, low carb space and what it is that you do.
Yeah, I'm engineer by day, married to Monica, who happens to have type 1 diabetes. And when we started to think about having kids, it was sort of like, okay, how do we get diabetes under control? And learned a lot back then. Very motivated to understand how to avoid the complications of a diabetic pregnancy. And then maybe 5 or 6 years ago, found, Rob Wolf, who's still sort of one of my biggest heroes, and then came across food insulin index and went, oh, wow, we can use that to dial in Moni's insulin. And, by having a lower insulin load diet, she can then stabilize the blood sugars and require less bolus insulin, which I understood the significance more of later. But then I suppose I looked at the foods that had the lowest insulin response, but also the highest fat and lowest nutrient density. So I threw together nutrient density into the system, and then satiety, and sort of trying to create a system not just for people managing diabetes, which ends up being a lower carb, higher fat keto type approach, but also people with other body composition goals, because not everybody is, managing epilepsy or type 1 diabetes. So they sort of need to find the right balance for them. And that's been a fascinating quest, and taking my engineering background of multi-criteria analysis and saying, okay, how do we design the right diet for you with your goals and your context?
I love it. And, you've got such a wonderful community that I've been able to kind of check in on, and such a supportive place that you're always in there and you've got people in there supporting people. I feel like a lot of people that come to data-driven fasting and what you're doing, they have been keto,
Mm.
or even been carnivore. They've tried a lot of fasting,
Yep.
and now they've kind of arrived on your doorstep.
Which is the same journey that I've tried. I've tried it all with fasting and the keto and not fully carnivore, but yeah, definitely got my head around all that. And yeah,
Yeah.
so it's just a really wonderful community of people who, yeah, it's a little bit more complex to understand the nuance. You can't just take on a named diet of, plant-based or vegan or carnivore or keto, because, those umbrella terms mean so many different things. And you can drive a truck through any of them. So they're basically meaningless, but we can use the numbers a little bit to help you go, okay, what's your goal? What's your context? Where you're at now and where do you want to go? And when we get there, we'll refine a little bit more and fine tune it. So yeah.
Yeah, that's the one thing that attracted me to what you're doing, is that I enjoyed fasting, but I'm kind of someone who likes to take it to the max.
Yeah,
And
as everybody does, more is always better, right?
right. And if, 24 hours is good, then 48 hours must be
Three
better. And
week,
then,
3 weeks must be better. I'm going to get all that autophagy and I'll be so healthy.
yeah, and the fasting is really, I feel like, what kind of started me on a downhill trajectory of
Wow.
just starting to gain weight and feel
Mm,
bad and have issues with
mm,
hormones. And
mm.
when you listen to all the different podcasts and YouTubes, it's like the more fasting the better. And
Yeah,
so I know you have experience doing a 7-day fast
yeah,
and
yeah.
trying all that. So what is, for people who are just like, well, what is the data-driven fasting? How is that different? How is it different than, just
Yeah.
so people can understand?
Yeah, I suppose the downside of extended fasting, like people think that autophagy is good and you can do 3 or 7 day fasts and get magic autophagies that'll make you healthy. But, that research is done in mice, and one mice day is 40 human days. So to get the autophagy results of the 40-day fasted mice, you need to fast for, how many days? It's just crazy how most of us be dead by the time we get to that length of time. And what happens when we fast for an extended period? We just trigger, well, most people get to the point where they're just really damn hungry and they want food, and they want any food, and they particularly want energy. So at that point, you just raiding the fridge, raiding the pantry, just eating until you're not hungry anymore, and your binge response is triggered. And the foods you choose at that point tend to be, especially if you combine fasting with keto, you just unlimited fat, because fat doesn't raise insulin, and therefore I can eat as much fat as I want. But at that point, they're going low protein, low nutrient density, and building back, fat, and not lean muscle mass, and not getting the nutrients they need. So, yeah, data-driven fasting is sort of designed to help people balance the feeding and fasting, get the right balance between going long enough that you're actually getting a negative energy balance, which is definitely good. We don't want to be over fat. We don't want to have a waist to height ratio greater than 0.5. And we want to look in the mirror and feel good. We don't need to be super lean, because at that point you get really hungry and miserable and tired and you drop your sex drive. You don't want to push it that far, but there's definitely benefits to being metabolically healthy and at a healthy body composition. Yeah, so it helps you find the balance and going long enough to the point that you can still choose healthy foods at that point. When for me, it's the yogurt and peanut butter and cream and butter. And I used to think that, I'm keto, so I just need to eat more butter when I refeed to get my ketones higher. And eventually realized that this isn't really giving me the magical results that I was promised. And yeah, so data-driven fasting uses blood sugars to tell you when you're actually needing to refuel based on your fuel gauge. And the blood sugar is just an incredibly responsive indicator of your need for more fuel at that point in time.
Yeah, that's what I loved just doing all the I mean, I do have a little callus here on my finger.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. I'm used to it now. Just a pretty little callus. Um, that, we just look at blood sugar and say it's kind of an after the fact thing that people
Yep.
want to test after they eat to see how
Yeah.
things are responding, or test,
Yeah.
the day after to see how they've responded. And there is a little bit of that, but I liked, testing to see, do I actually need to be eating this
Yeah.
meal right now? Am
Yeah.
I below my trigger?
Yeah.
And sometimes I was, but then there were some days where I really wasn't. And I said,
Yeah.
well, I don't need to be eating right now. So trying to just
Yeah.
learn
Yeah.
the hunger signals, I think
Yeah.
is
That's so
huge for
important.
people. Yeah.
And we don't want you to keep on having to test your blood sugars forever. You eventually actually calibrate your hunger and understand what real hunger is, and you can differentiate it from dreaming of donuts or eating for the multitude of other reasons that we tend to eat. But if you're above, if your blood sugar is still high, you've got plenty of fuel in your system, and you don't need fuel from fat and carbs. You just need nutrients from protein, vitamins, minerals, essential fatty acids. So you can just sort of dial in your food choices at that point and say, okay, I don't need fuel, I just need nutrients. And when your blood sugars drop, you can go, okay, to prevent rebound binging, maybe I can top up with a little bit more carbohydrate, because, if you just eat carbohydrate without fat, you don't tend to overeat the way you would with a pizza and a donut, which is just that magic combo of carbs and fat.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love how your group is not like vegan or vegetarian or keto or carnivore. The carbs are not a bad word in there. It's not, I think you guys probably tend a little bit more towards low carb,
Yeah.
but it's not like a bad word. It's not off limits for people.
No, totally. And we want to embrace all preferences and approaches, and we want to show how you can optimize a plant-based diet. People following a plant-based diet just because they have different ethical beliefs still need nutrients, and same for carnivore. They still need nutrients. You just need to find a way to get them on your preferred, limited choice of foods.
Yeah, that was one of the episodes I watched on your YouTube channel. Was a lady who was taking a ton of supplements, right? And she did your master class, because after the data-driven fasting, you can do a master class on how to optimize nutrients. And she had come off of, a ton of supplements, which I know a lot of people take them, because she had learned through your master class of how to actually eat to get the right nutrients for her body without all the extra supplements. So I think that's really
So many
cool.
people saving so much money from realizing that they can get the nutrients they need from the food they eat, and way more than the minimum to prevent diseases of deficiency. And you can just, throw out the supplement. You don't need to keep spending hundreds of dollars a month on these magic supplements that are these isolated chemical compounds in a way that your body doesn't really know what to do with, and they don't come with the other beneficial nutrients and in the ratios that your body knows what to do with. You just dump, if you have a magnesium powders, your body's just going to go, I can't deal with all this magnesium all at once. So you're off to the toilet and just flushing out the extra supplement and every other bit of food you ate that day, because your bowels don't know how to process all that form of nutrient. But if you can get it from real food, it's a whole different story.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess one of my biggest questions, before I want to jump into some of the things in your book, I have the list of things printed out, which is Big Fat Keto Lies, which, a lot of people that listen to my show and watch my YouTube and my podcast, they are keto, they are low carb, and some of them carnivore. How did you get to this place with the data-driven fasting? I know you've kind of alluded to starting out keto for you and your wife, and how did you kind of get to the place where you are now?
I suppose I went from Rob Wolf to 1,000 Jimmy Moore episodes and being involved in Low Carb Down Under, and there's some great learnings and great things to take from it. And like, my wife is type 1 diabetic, so that the improvement in her blood sugars and quality of life and depression and energy levels and everything from stabilizing her blood sugars is magic. So there's incredible power in a lower carbohydrate. You don't need to overfill your carb fuel tank if it's already full, and if your blood sugars are oscillating like a a roller coaster. You really want to stabilize to healthy levels, but more, if a little is good, more is better. And most people swing to the opposite extreme and say, okay, carbs are bad, fat is unlimited good, and I just need higher ketones. And people were chasing ketones for so long because there was this optimal ketone chart that was magic if you got to that zone. But to get there, you just had to keep on chowing down the butter and MCT oil, and which is so little protein, so little nutrients, and most people lost lean mass and gained body fat. I know I did, and I looked horrifically inflamed and didn't feel great and was heavier than I ever was. So it's like, okay, it's not just magic ketones. It's I need to design a diet that enables me to not be compelled to overeat, because as much as you can control your calories for a certain period of time, eventually your body tells you how much you need to eat, and you eat until you're full and stop thinking of eating and stop jumping up out of bed and raiding the fridge when you're hungry after you go to bed. That's my experience anyway. So it was sort of the quest to go, okay, what is it about food that makes us satisfied versus overly hungry, and dove into the numbers and tried to quantify it, and then just tried to cull the things that have been told, like eat fat to satiety, and you can, and that'll lead to weight loss, and more ketones are better, and fasting for longer is better, and insulin is, fat doesn't stimulate insulin, and all these sorts of things. So I sort of worked through all those lies or untruths or half-truths that people cling to, and dissected them based on my data-driven approach to nutrition, and presented the data. And the name Big Fat Keto Lies triggers a few people, but once they get past the cover and read the information, they go, yeah, I think you might be onto something. I just had a chat to Andreas Seinfeld yesterday, which is a whole lot of fun, from Diet Doctor. And yeah, Ted Naiman gave him the book, and 6 months later, he's completely changed the direction of his company. So it's
Wow.
It's having an impact, and nobody out there has come back and said you're wrong, and the people that I respect really appreciate it. And it's good to see that information getting out there and actually helping people get the results they need, rather than just believing in what they've been told from some meme.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm totally on the same page with you, is that we both want to actually genuinely help people. And there's so many people in the community that they really do want to just help people. And so many people that follow me have kind of followed me through my journey, and copied what I've done, and have, gained weight trying to chase those ketones. And I see a lot of people just kind of stuck. And even the higher, this is another phenomenon, and I know this is kind of one of the things you talk about in your book, is that perhaps they get the higher ketones, right? They're doing the high fat and then the kind of low to moderate protein, but they still have elevated blood sugars. And that the first time that a light bulb moment was in your data-driven fasting and in your work, where you talk about if there's an energy excess, that the blood sugar may not go up immediately after you eat the fat, but it's like overall it's going to be higher. Can you talk about that just a little bit?
Yeah, carbs will boost your blood sugar in the short term, and if you have an apple or a potato, your blood sugar will spike and then return back to baseline 2 or 3 hours later, and it may actually crash a little bit lower. And that's sometimes where we get hungry, particularly when our blood sugar crashes and you want to raise it, and your body goes, okay, I've got a lack of short-term availability of fuel. I need to eat to bring my blood sugars back up, and it's really sensitive to that. So that you do want to avoid that. And if your blood sugars are oscillating, we say by more than, if they rise by more than 1.6 millimoles or 30 milligrams per deciliter after you eat, you're probably overfilling your carb fuel tank. But dietary fat doesn't get a free ride either, because over the longer term, fat really prevents your blood sugars from dropping. So if you have a massive high fat meal, you'll often see your blood sugars elevated in the morning, and that's an indication that your energy stores overall are over full, your fat's over full. And if you look at it from a oxidative priority perspective, once your adipose tissue gets full, it doesn't work as a sponge very well to soak up all the excess fuel, and it then backs up into the bloodstream in the forms of glucose, free fatty acids, and ketones. So if you've got elevated glucose, ketones, or free fatty acids, then you're probably over fat and need to find a way to eat to reduce your stored energy, which is all about satiety and nutrient density and more nutrients per calorie. And then that just tames your appetite to the point that you can actually lose body fat.
Yeah, I think that's a piece that a lot of people are missing. And we talked a little bit before I turned on the recording. I went through a phase last year where I gained about 20 pounds, and I was just eating a high fat carnivore diet. So just meat and fat. And I was really hungry. I mean, I was just hungry.
Wow.
You know, I was eating like 60 grams of protein a day, 55, 60 grams of protein. And then I would have the rest of it was, the rest of it was fat. And I'm 5'7". And, that's what I was told to do to get into optimal ketosis. Now, hormonally, I did have a lot of things that straightened out because I was doing a lot of extended fasting, and I had a lot of issues. I had lost my cycle, wasn't feeling well, was having horrible sleep. And so this is, what I was told, do this. And the sleep got better, cycles returned, all of that. But then I gained the 20 pounds, and I was and I was still hungry. And I got to a point where I was like, why am I so hungry? And I totaled up the amount of calories I was eating, and it was well over 2,500 calories a day, sometimes more than that, sometimes up to 3,000 calories a day. And I was still hungry. And it wasn't until, I started digging a little deeper and saying, I don't think I'm getting the nutrients that I need from this diet, from the majority of my energy coming from beef fat, beef suet. It's just not giving me what I need.
And Professor Robinheimer and Simpson from University of Sydney, who I'm talking with Ted Naiman in a couple of weeks, talk about the protein leverage hypothesis. But I think there's also an overall nutrient leverage hypothesis. Our analysis shows that it's not just amino acids, but it's also particularly minerals, cholesterol, omega-3, and vitamins to some extent are all associated with reduced appetite. So once you get enough of each of those 34 essential nutrients in adequate quantities per calorie, your appetite settles down and you tend to eat less. So you just need enough. You don't need to swing to the other extreme, because a highly nutrient dense diet, a high protein percentage diet, is really hard to overeat, and there'll be an energy deficit and a craving for energy at that point. So you just need to find that balance, and that's the hard thing, because we're all about memes and social media and us versus them, and we want to swing to be in the high fat or the low fat camp, or the high protein or low. And what the hell does that mean anyway? You just need to go, where I'm at now, I'm going to move the needle just a little bit and see how my appetite responds, my body composition responds. And if you're getting progress, great, don't change. But if you need to dial it a little bit more, then change a little bit more. And once I talked to Andreas Seinfeld last night about, once he got to 8% body fat and he didn't want to keep losing body fat, he needs to bring back a little bit more energy from fat and carbs to stop continuing to lose weight, because it's not healthy to be super lean all the time, and it's really hard to sustain. And I find it's hard to think, and you need to find a point where you're happy, look in the mirror, you feel healthy and energetic, but not so lethargic because you went too far in the other extreme.
Yeah, absolutely. That's, and so many people that follow me and are in my audience, we are extreme. I seem to attract people that are just like me.
That's a lot of the carnivore community, because obviously that what we're doing, and the advice to eat plant-based and focus on and avoid red meat was wrong. So let's swing to the other extreme. But there's always sort of a balance point where optimal is usually somewhere between those two extremes, and you just need to find what you enjoy and what you can sustain and gives you the nutrients you need.
Yeah, I've just, my whole kind of motto for my podcast and everything is just meat-based, but dogma-free, because I think that we need the meat for me. For me,
Yeah,
I
definitely.
did vegan for 2 years and ended up on 5 different psychiatric medications and
Wow.
cavities. And as a yoga teacher, was injured constantly, and none of my injuries would ever heal because I didn't have any, proper building blocks for my
Protein.
body. Yeah,
Yeah, protein
I
is
needed
just
the protein.
incredibly important, and that's the massive benefit of a carnivore diet. It's really hard not to get enough protein unless you think protein's bad and you need to drink fat. But other than that, you're going to get enough protein, and that the magic happens, and you eliminate most of the inflammatory foods that most people struggle with. So it's a great elimination diet as well, and yeah.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful for that. But I have some people that, they've just done it and they need to change it up. And
Mm,
if we want to stick and say, I kept the name carnivore yogi because I think it kind of stands for something that,
mm,
it's okay to do yoga and meditate and do these practices and eat meat at the same time. That's kind of why I kept the name.
mm,
Um, but to stick and just say I have to be carnivore forever and that's the only way to do it and it's the only way
mm.
to be healthy, I definitely do not stand for that at
Yeah.
all. And I have some clients now that are, we're just stuck. And I said, you know what, let's try and add a little bit of carb back into your diet
Mm,
and see if that helps you. And if it doesn't,
yeah.
we'll go back to zero carb and
Yeah.
keto. But I have 2 clients right now that are just dropping weight and
Wow.
feeling better after just adding in some sweet potato and some
Yeah.
berries. They're not
Yeah.
eating cake and ice cream. We think carbs and everyone thinks running to the cupcakes,
Yeah. Totally. Totally.
it's we can eat healthy carbs and we're not going to gain weight from eating a sweet potato.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Plant-based versus carnivore is such
Ugh.
plant-based is such a meaningless term at the same time, because you're not going to blow up from eating a bit of sweet potato, because sometimes you can get glucose from protein, but it's a really slow, hard going
It
process. So if you're
is.
doing a lot of intense activity, a lot of yoga, I don't know how much energy you burn in a yoga session, but a little bit of sweet potato might help you feel better and more energetic and more active, and that's going to be a great thing. But and spinach or whatever those green non-starchy veggies, if you can tolerate them, can be beneficial to get some of the harder to find minerals. But plant-based also includes industrial vegetable oils and refined
Yes.
grains and refined sugar, and that's the definition of plant-based that's so pushed out there. Game changers. You, you,
Mm-hmm.
you can't get a hard on if you eat animal foods. Therefore, just eat plant-based and avoid animals. And that's just everything of refined industrial agriculture that
Yeah.
the food manufacturers want to sell you, because it's so cheap, hyper palatable, and hyper profitable, because it's subsidized and large scale crop agriculture, and it's just the box is more expensive than the ingredients, and it's just crazy, and it's great business but really
Mm-hmm.
bad for humans.
Yeah, it's sad how much, there's just so much propaganda on
Mm,
the food and I feel like we're being as a human species just poisoned
yeah.
constantly. And I talked with a friend of mine the other day who's a functional medicine doctor and she said, "Oh, our diet is, not just the food that we eat, that's important, but we have to look at the skincare products we use
Mm,
and how much we're getting in the sun and the laundry
mm,
detergent we use and
mm,
how we, it's
yeah.
our whole lifestyle and so
Yeah.
many like just the seed oils and all the things that are put
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
anytime, I finally got my husband on board. He's still, you know, married to a carnivore for a while, has his green smoothies every morning still.
Ironic. That's great.
Right? Like I taught him that years ago and that it's a habit
He
that
still likes them.
he still likes them. But he's 6'4" and jogs 4 miles a day
Yep.
and is in fabulous shape. So I
That's
can't really
great.
like throw stones at him. He's in fabulous shape, lean and fit and
Yep.
everything. So I'm
Yep.
like, fine, if that's what you want to do it. But I finally got him to throw out all of his salad dressings that
Right.
had and I said, we're gonna only have Primal Ranch in the house, or
Cool.
I'm gonna make it. But it's so I was just like, we have to understand these things are going to be toxic to your body.
Mm.
Like this is just as important as,
Yeah.
getting the proper nutrients as well.
Yeah, the amount of energy that's come into our food system over the last 100 years since we worked out how to industrially hydrogenate vegetable oils is just massive. It's like 600 calories per person on average per day. It's a massive amount of extra energy with no nutrients just being dumped into the food system, and they love it. The
Yeah.
manufacturers love it, and we love to eat it, especially when it's got colors and flavors and a bit of flour with it, and it just makes all the Cocoa Pops and donuts and pizza and everything that we just can't stop eating. And it's just great business. And
Yeah.
if you add the plant-based environmental overlay that they love to spin along with it, they don't have to directly advertise it. They just make you afraid of cholesterol and saturated fat and animal products. So you have to eat this trash. It's the perfect system. It's just amazingly smart to make us all afraid of the foods that give us the protein and nutrients we need.
Yeah, it's terrifying. And my family, my sisters and my mom, we all live here in the same city. I'm the oldest of three, and I'm the crazy one. Like they, I've always been the extreme one to try. I'm like, I'll try it, I'll do it. I'm just kind of a seeker. That's what I do. I've been to Bali and all over to study spiritual things. I study the food. I just want to
Mm,
learn. But they kind of eat whatever they want. They eat out of
mm,
boxes and processed
mm.
foods. And I went from, I'm the oldest, now looking like I'm the youngest,
Yeah.
and they all, I love them dearly, but they struggle with weight problems. And
Mm,
my niece, who I love dearly, is 4, and my sister took her to the doctor, and the doctor said, well, I think you need to see a nutritionist. I'm worried about her being so overweight at this
yeah.
age. And my
Yeah.
sister was talking to me. She's like, well, I feed her healthy. I give her oatmeal
Mm,
and, yogurt with fruit. And I give, she's like telling me the things that she feeds her. And I'm like, why not bacon and boiled eggs? Why
yeah.
not hard boiled eggs? And why not more protein?
Yeah.
And she's like, she doesn't want to hear anything from me because I'm crazy. She thinks I'm the one that went on an all meat diet. But it just shows how thick the brainwashing is
Mm.
about all
Oh,
what's healthy and what we should be eating. And,
it's endemic. And if you go to a nutritionist, you get the same story
yeah,
that's generated by, I talked to Belinda Fetke a couple of weeks ago, and she's amazing. And I grew up in a Seventh Adventist home, and, um, you know, parents left the church when I was about 10, but the amount of influence that the SDA Church has had on nutritional dogma, because they're trying to convert more people to be plant-based vegetarian, to bring the Garden of Eden back to earth so that Jesus will come sooner. I mean, that's a really powerful motivation, and they have massively, subtly impacted the way we think about food over the last 50 years, and it can't be understated. And then combine that with, you know, big food with, big pharma and big fertilizer all together. It sounds like a stupid conspiracy theory, but it's
yeah,
how we're being fed, it's how we're being taught about our food. And you have to just, once you strip all that away and can just go, okay, all I need is enough nutrients without excess energy. If I've got body fat to burn, like, let's just strip all the dogma away and say, okay, I need nutrients. My body needs nutrients. It needs protein. It needs vitamins, minerals. Your niece just is craving protein to grow, and
yeah,
she's not getting enough from the fruit, yogurts,
oatmeal,
and
yogurt,
oatmeal,
yeah,
and she just keeps on eating those foods
yeah,
until she gets enough protein to grow, and then she ends up eating too many calories, and
yeah.
she's obese and metabolically healthy and unhealthy and diabetic at a young age. It's just horrifically scary, and that's what everybody's doing.
Yeah, I just saw today all these posts on Facebook and Instagram that the type 2 diabetes in children has
Mm,
doubled over the last
mm,
18 months.
mm.
I mean, that's a shocking statistic, but I mean, it's not so shocking if you look around, if you look
Yeah,
around and see what's out there. It's like the obesity epidemic in our children is huge,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you don't have to change the protein percentage that much. You only have to go from like 11 to 13.5% or whatever, and you've reduced the overall energy intake by 11%. You get a massive leverage by increasing your protein percentage just a little bit. So if you're at 20 and you get a 25, you're going to be dropping your appetite, dropping your calories by a massive amount just by prioritizing getting the protein you need first in the day. And then if you want to level up, you can add, how do I, get the other nutrients I need as well as just the amino acids.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if people would just, prioritize the protein and just eat real food, that's kind of
Mm.
what we've
Yeah.
done with my daughter. It's not that hard,
Yeah, no. And the kids love it. And once
Yeah.
they get used to eating that way, they enjoy it. They make, like, our kids make their own amazingly nourishing foods. And they know that, sometimes those junk foods are tasty, but it's not a way to eat. And too much of them just makes them feel like crap and they don't want to continue to eat those foods.
Yeah, it's remarkable. My daughter has non-speaking autism and she's 13, and so we have a lot
Wow.
of challenges with her, but one thing that I've done with her and her diet is just nothing from a box, no processed
Mm.
foods. We've done really strict keto. The girl loves protein though. Before we took her on more keto, she wouldn't eat meat at all.
Mm.
And she
Mm.
wanted to just eat, we had her gluten-free, dairy-free, because that's,
Mm.
what you're supposed to do with the kids. And she would just eat the gluten-free pretzels and the packaged stuff. And when the pandemic hit, I said, all this is leaving. We're not having we're stuck in this house. This junk is not staying.
Yeah.
And she'll eat when she's hungry. And
Yep.
My husband was like, she's not eating. And I said, she will eat
Good.
when she's hungry. And I
Yeah.
remember making her a plate of chicken wings, and she was sitting there just like, I'm not touching this. And I just waited, and it took about an hour, and she finally was just hungry, picked it up and just ate the entire plate of chicken wings. And from that day forward, she just loves the protein and loves chicken, will eat meatball. She loves the protein now, and that's
Yep.
mostly what she eats. And she does so much better than
Mm.
we don't eat the processed foods and the junks and stuff. And she just does so much better on that type of a
Yeah.
diet, just
That's
happier
great.
and more calm and regulated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just need to have the high quality foods in the house and
Yeah.
try to minimize the packaged junk that
Yeah.
we'll all go for, especially kids. They love
Oh yeah.
they
Yeah.
love the shiny, bright, tasty foods that pack from packages. They're so much
Yeah.
easier and tastier and manufactured to be that way. But if you've got the steak and eggs and whatever in the fridge ready to go, then they're gonna get hungry enough to eat those and love it and grow and thrive.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I want to jump into your book a little bit, kind of
Yeah, let's
pivot,
do it.
because there's so much stuff in here in your Big Fat Keto Lies book that I feel like people need to hear about this. And number one and number two and number three, I guess, kind of all go together with ketosis. You need to be in ketosis if you want to lose weight. You need to eat more fat. Fat burning is only in ketosis. Can you kind of talk through that a little bit and talk about how people might be able to lose weight without having a 3.0 ketone?
Yeah, I mean, ketones are great if they're coming from your body fat. Like if they're coming from the fat on your bum and your belly, which is what you want, they're a great thing. And so many beneficial things come from a lowered energy state. And that's why we see all these great benefits of ketosis. But if those ketones come from jamming in extra MCT oil and butter and exogenous ketones, just chasing that elevated ketosis level, you're going to end up like you and us, looking, you and me, just looking inflamed and bloated and putting on extra weight and feeling foggy and with elevated blood sugars as well. You're just driving this energy toxicity in the hope of that you get these magic level of ketones. And if you look at, I had Steve Finney stay here when he spoke in Brisbane one time, and said, where did the numbers come from for that optimal ketosis chart? And it's a couple of studies, one in cyclists and one in a weight loss trial, where both people had transitioned to a ketogenic diet. Both groups had transitioned to a ketogenic diet recently. And it seems that initially you don't use the ketones well because you've still got plenty of glucose and, so you see elevated ketones, but over time, as more people were following a ketogenic diet, you see the fittest and healthiest people like Louis Villaseñor and other people who are at really healthy body compositions, plenty of muscle mass, have much lower ketone levels, 0.3, 0.2, 0.4. So you're spending $3 a strip checking your ketones, hoping for magic, and you're going, okay, I'm feeling better, I'm looking better, I'm stronger, I'm leaner, but my ketones are dropping. What's up with that? Do I need to add more butter? Am I unhealthy because I'm muscular and lean? It just doesn't make sense. So, you're going to have ketones if you're dropping body fat. And if, like with data-driven fasting, if you wait long enough for your blood sugars to drop, you're going to have endogenous ketosis happening from your body as you lose your body fat. But if your ketosis comes from jamming in extra MCT oil and butter that you didn't need because you've got plenty of stored body fat, you're probably going backwards in health and driving metabolic derangement and obesity, diabetes, because you're chasing this mythical state of ketosis that isn't real. And elevated ketones is not necessarily a marker of health. Low blood sugars, low pre-meal blood sugars, and low body fat are a much better indicator of metabolic health.
Yeah, when I did the month of data-driven fasting, I lost 6 pounds, which I was excited about. Yeah, that was the last of the 20 pounds that I had gained from the high-fat experiment.
It's
gone terribly wrong. Yes.
Keto be gone.
Goodbye, high-fat experiment. I lost that last 6 pounds in the data-driven fasting, and I would just because I have the strips, I have companies that will send me strips and meters and things. So I would check my ketones and they were always like 0.4, 0.3. But I also have a breath meter, and the breath meter would always, even though I was like a 0.4, 0.3 on the ketones, it would always say I'm in the maximum fat burn,
When you were losing weight.
Yeah, when I was losing weight during data-driven fasting, because I did say, you know what? I'm going to push my protein up a little bit. I'm going to be, I'm going to allow myself to have more protein, to prioritize it, to try to just do it the way that it's explained in the program, and
it worked.
Go with the flow. And it worked, but like I said, my ketones were super low, but I wasn't freaking out about it because the scale was moving. I was feeling good. And then when I blew in the breath meter, it was like, oh, you're in maximum fat burning mode. So I'm like, does this ketone thing really matter so much as we make it out to be?
Interestingly, the beta hydroxybutyrate, which is what you measure in your blood, is often termed the gold standard, but it's really just a transport and storage form of ketones that sit in your blood, and it has to be converted to be used in your mitochondria. So when you blow in and do the breath acetone, that acetone is actually an indicator that you're actually using the ketones for energy. So having low stored levels because you don't have a high level of energy toxicity anymore, and you're actually using ketones, is a really good state. But meanwhile, everybody else would still be measuring and trying to go, 0.3 isn't high enough. I need more exogenous ketones. Let me prove it,
Yeah. No, thank you.
That was the biggest scam. When every keto and low carb guru in the market is a prove it affiliate.
It's still going on. I mean, I still see it on my feed every now and then. I'm like, do they still actually buying this? Are they still doing this?
Yeah, it was the biggest disservice to the keto and low carb movement. I think it was sort of the beginning at the end, and you see over the last 2 years, searches for keto are sort of starting to crash, and the keto trend is crashing. Basically, the trend, the fad is over, and people are going to look for something else, and hopefully they won't turn to plant-based, which, as we said, means nothing useful. So it's not a useful way to guide your diet.
Yeah, I think that the diet names, like we said earlier, are just not useful at all. I mean, like I said, I kept the name Carnivore Yogi because it stands for something in my book, and people are like, oh, but you're still carnivore, right? You still have to fit into that label. And I'm like, if I want to eat some Brussels sprouts, then I do. and I have no problem. I don't feel
It's not
bad
against my
about it.
region.
It's not a bad thing, you know.
You might get some magnesium and potassium that the steak didn't have, and that's okay.
Right, exactly. You know, I just feel like we just swing so far
Yeah.
with these diets and with fasting and with all of this that we miss the mark, which the mark is health and the mark is optimal body composition and how are you feeling and how are you sleeping and how are your hormones, you know. And if
Totally.
I feel like if we dive down into these places so deeply, we might miss, you know, different health markers that are screaming at us.
Yeah, just go for the simple ones initially.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
all you, and simple. What was it? I don't know, I heard something great the other day. You know, do the simple first, and then don't do anything else. Because once you've done the simple, hard things, nothing else will really matter. You'll be where you need to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the other thing that is a big, you know, people on carnivore aren't falling into this so much, but keto people with really being afraid of I mean, I still was a little afraid of the protein because I think I was overdoing it a bit on carnivore, like
Right.
full carnivore. I got some lab markers back at the beginning of 2020 before I did my high fat experiment, and I had really high bun and creatinine, and
Yep.
my GFR had gone to like a 60, and that scared me. And I was like,
Yeah,
oh,
but
it's
that's
got to be the protein.
that's an interesting marker because they look at your creatinine in your blood, which is a marker of if you do have kidney dysfunction, you're not going to be filtering your protein well, and it'll be leaching into your bloodstream. But if you've got more muscle mass, if you're eating more protein, it sort of makes sense that your creatinine will be higher. So they do an estimated glucomular filtration rate, which then they use that to say your kidneys are failing because you're eating too much protein. But
Yeah.
it's estimated. Ted Naiman says eating more protein is like a resistance training workout for your kidneys. You're really building a bigger, stronger kidney because you're using it more. And your bodybuilders aren't on dialysis; they're eating heaps of protein. And I think that's not a useful marker. I think the blood glucose, your waist to height ratio, your strength, weight on
Yeah.
the bar, whatever, how far can I walk, how's my sleep, they're much better markers of health. And
I
they're not
agree.
used to seeing people eating that much protein on the labs, and therefore you're out of range compared to the rest of the unhealthy population.
Yeah, I agree. You know, and after this last month, I got that metabolic panel run again, and all
Oh
the
yeah.
numbers are good. My
Yeah.
GFR is like a 110 now,
Yeah,
and
cool.
everything's in a good range. But I think some people get those lab values back and they just completely freak out, and they're like, well, I just need to eat 60 grams of protein per day. That's all I'm allowed to eat, and do super high fat. And then I think it ends up putting them not necessarily in the best situation.
Yeah. If you're on
Yeah.
kidney dialysis, you should speak to your endocrinologist about, nephrologist about how much protein you're eating. But if you're not on stage 5 renal failure with a nephrologist, then you probably don't need to worry about eating too much protein, because protein by itself is really hard to overeat. How much egg white or chicken breast or shrimp do you eat? There's just a natural point where you go, I've had enough. It's when you combine the low protein with lots of added fat, the fattiest cuts of meat, you can definitely overeat that. And especially if you combine, protein is demonized because most people who eat lots of protein are also eating it with fat and carbs on pizza.
Yeah.
And that's when just increasing your protein from pizza or butter, you're going to overdo your protein. But if you choose more smartly the higher percentage protein foods, that are just impossible to overeat.
Yeah, I agree. I think people just it's what they're eating it with. I think that kind of gives it the bad name. It really does. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. And this keto lie number 5, I'm kind of going down the list. Fat is a free food because it doesn't elicit an insulin response, which we've talked about quite a bit. But so the fat and the insulin thing, can you bust that myth just a little bit more in depth for people and for me?
Yeah, I mean, carbs create like I said before, just a short-term insulin response, and fat seems to create a a longer term insulin response, but fat in some ways doesn't need as much insulin to be stored because your body says, yeah, welcome home. I'd love to store you. And it's really easy to store the fat on your body. So it doesn't actually need as much insulin to hold in storage. But the other thing, looking at my wife's CGM and insulin pump, 24/7 pretty much for the last 9 months that she's had it, it's really dawned on me more and more that the insulin required is a function of how much body fat you've got stored. So trying to manage your insulin by avoiding carbs and switching that out for fat is like measuring, the volume of the ocean by, the height of the waves on a calm day. It's just a ridiculously stupid way of looking at how much insulin your body is requiring. And if you want to reduce the amount of insulin you required to hold your fat in storage, you just need less fat in storage. And talking to Andreas last night, he said when he was eating 40% protein and dropped to 8% body fat, his fasting insulin was through the floor to type 1 diabetic levels. And
wow,
it was like really, really low, just because most people don't get to that level of leanness. But his blood sugars are also incredible. So he's far from metabolically unhealthy. He's at the other extreme where the body fat levels are so low that your body doesn't need to keep on pumping out insulin to keep your body fat in storage. So if you want to control your insulin, control your body fat by eating in a way that gives you satiety.
Yep, absolutely. And like we talked about so much on this podcast already, it's so easy to overeat the fat because if your body is still lacking nutrients, you're going to keep searching for food, and I feel like that's why a lot of people kind of go to this high fat approach. They chase the ketones. They, want to get the numbers at a specific place and they're still hungry. That's the biggest complaint I think I get from people that are like, I'm gaining weight and I'm still hungry, and then the person, the keto guru or whatever says, well, you need to eat more fat,
Not eating enough fat. I mean, that's what you hear in all the keto groups. And that, I spent so much time in Facebook groups just having the same circular arguments. So I started a blog so I could have longer discussions with myself and share them, and then wrote a book to try to consolidate all that into one place. And
yeah. And this whole insulin toxicity thing. A lot of people just act like they don't have a pancreas that works correctly, right?
Yeah. Totally. If I chase you around with my wife's insulin pen and jam in short acting insulin, your blood sugars are going to plummet. Like we said before, you're going to feel hungry and you're going to be compelled to overeat. But if you've got a functioning pancreas, your pancreas is smart. It just won't produce more insulin required to hold in the energy that you keep on eating through your mouth all the time. So the way to control that is, again, back to satiety and nutrient density. And you need to manage energy toxicity, which is the upstream thing that controls insulin toxicity. You only get elevated insulin and insulin toxicity if you've got too much energy, which comes back to energy balance and calories in, calories out to some extent, but most people fail at counting calories. It's about the macros and the percentage protein, and the nutrient density is what controls your satiety, enables you to automatically manage your intake and not need to count calories. So if you prioritize protein and nutrients with less energy, you're going to automatically eat less.
Yeah, but I think people do, on the same token, kind of go into keto and act as though calories don't exist,
Like, keto is magic. I lowered my carbs and I ate less. But hey, when you lower your carbs, you eat more protein. Is it the protein providing the satiety that's magic, or is it the fact that you didn't fear butter and cream? And usually the people that glorify the unlimited fat are the ones you see 3 years later and looking like they did maybe worse than 3 years before. So
yeah, I mean, you've been to so many, I guess, conferences and events over the last number of years. I'm sure that you do kind of see that the people that are kind of professing, calories don't matter and you just eat fat to satiety. Do you see a lot of them kind of
Yeah. 3 years later, the people that are arguing with me about, avoid the protein because of gluconeogenesis, it'll drive your blood sugars and make you fat and increase your insulin. 3 or 4 years later, they're practicing what they preach and they don't look so hot anymore.
Yeah.
They're just getting worse rather than better, and blaming it on some genetic or metabolic problem they've got. But if they just stopped following their own advice, they'd be thriving.
Yeah, I think that's hard. That's so hard for people to do. Like we're talking about with the different diets and the labels. Sometimes it's hard for people to just pivot, and say,
it's hard to admit you were wrong when you told everybody. It's hard to unsee it once you've believed something. Once I believed that fat was a free food, I was really sad when intellectually I realized that wasn't true. And then to untrain your subconscious instincts once you've believed that, to wind that back is really hard, even once you've intellectually accepted it.
Yeah, it really is. It truly is. And I think that's like the number 12, just jumping ahead a little bit, is when in doubt, keep calm and keto on, right?
Yeah. Just don't believe everybody else. We are the true believers and we are the true tribe, and keto is everything, and you just need to add more fat, and it doesn't work for most people, really.
It's such a hard thing for people, because I feel like we want to be in tribe mentality. We want to
belong to a club that.
Yeah. And then, we have to that's why I love talking with people like you. I like to talk with people who kind of challenge things, to challenge the dogma, because at the end of it, people can be helped. I mean, I know that there's a lot of people that do keto for medical reasons, for health reasons. And
if you've got Alzheimer's, dementias, Parkinson's, or epilepsy, then go for it. Then you probably need more elevated ketones. But everybody else, 99.5% of people who are following a ketogenic diet shouldn't be chasing ketones. And if you take out ketones from the picture, if optimal ketone zone is garbage for 99.5% of the population, then keto has got a massive identity crisis. What does keto mean? It means nothing.
Yeah.
It's a bubble.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And, just going back to the studies that you were talking about, that those people, they were saying these ranges are optimal for ketosis. Your ketones are going to be a lot higher when you first start a ketogenic diet. And so they're basing these optimal numbers off of people who were pretty new to the ketogenic diet, right?
Yeah,
and
totally.
Saying these are what we need to aim for. And so if people continue to try to chase that, it's not based on anything really long-term scientific, number one. And then two, we're going to run into these other issues, right?
Yeah, totally. But you've got so many companies now set up around keto, and it's going to be hard to turn the ship around. But plenty of people are jumping off the ship, so that's
well, it's
the
funny.
ship is getting smaller.
A couple people that were in your data-driven fasting, my aunt, who I've seen her, I haven't talked to her in years. Yeah, but I saw her in your group. Yeah, I haven't talked to her in years, but I've seen her kind of bounce around, like Dr. Boz, and then in some carnivore groups, and just seeing her go through different things. And I'm like, oh, and now she's here.
Welcome home. Exactly. You have arrived to the true one club. Everything we say is no. Truth.
Yeah. I guess, the one thing I want to talk about is the stable blood sugars leading to fat loss. If we could tackle that just a little bit. I think that's the only one we haven't really talked about in your list.
Yeah. Again, stable blood sugars are great, but and people who are metabolically healthy will have healthy, stable blood sugars because they've got plenty of room in their fat stores for their energy to be stored. Their liver isn't chock full of glycogen, and the adipose tissue isn't chock full of fat. So when they eat, their excess energy that they eat will go into storage and it won't back up into the bloodstream. So people see that and go, okay, I need to have flatline blood sugars to be healthy. So they'll cut out all carbs and say, fat is a free food. I'm going to switch everything. And I'm even going to avoid protein, because protein can go through gluconeogenesis and turn into glucose. So that's really bad. So I need to avoid protein too, and I just need flat, stable blood sugar. So they get a CGM and drink butter and MCT oil or whatever, and think fat as a free food. But it's just low satiety and keeps on, like you said, you crave more of that because you're not getting the nutrients you need. And rather than worrying about keeping flatline blood sugars, we say, if your blood sugars rise more than 30 milligrams per deciliter after you eat, you're probably overfilling, you're topping out your glucose fuel tank. So yeah, sure, back it off, get stable blood sugars so you're not on that roller coaster that makes you craving hungry. But at that point, if you've got body fat to lose, then you need to dial back your dietary fat to allow that body fat to be used. And once you empty your adipose tissue fuel tank and your glucose fuel tank, then your blood sugars will actually be healthy. You're not just managing the symptom by avoiding carbs and going unlimited fat. You're actually becoming metabolically healthy once you empty your adipose tissue fuel tank and your liver glycogen fuel tank, and your blood sugars will drop and be stable because you're actually metabolically healthy. So it's just a different way of looking at it, and everybody in the dog has got a CGM these days because they can get a doctor to prescribe it. Meanwhile, in Australia, where it's really expensive to get a CGM to pay for it, but everybody in the health funds in the US is getting these CGM toys and going, oh yeah, I sneezed, or I had a bit too much caffeine in my coffee, or I had some stevia and I saw my blood sugar rise, and that's gonna make me fat because my blood sugar rose by 3 points. What should I do? They're just going insane with all this data. No. It's just driving the wrong mentality, and that's where we say, okay, let's look at your pre-meal blood sugar. Let's use a simple glucometer, which is dead simple, dead cheap. Nobody's hocking them on every podcast, getting an affiliate cut. They're just, at your drugstore, at your chemist. You can buy them cheap. And when you feel hungry, test your blood sugar. If your blood sugar's low, you go, yeah, I need to eat. I can eat a hearty meal. I'll try to make it nutrient dense. If your blood sugar's above your trigger, maybe you can wait a bit longer. You don't actually need to refuel. And if you're really hungry, then maybe just prioritize the protein and nutrients because you don't need the fuel from the fat and carbs at that point. So, and that just has magic results. So as you've seen from DDF, we're just amazed by the numbers we see at the end of every challenge. It's really cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. And so many people that I was listening before I did it, I was on your YouTube channel kind of listening to the stories of the people and the people who had tried keto and tried, it's a lot of women, menopausal women and perimenopausal women. And those are my ladies that come to me and I can't lose weight and I don't know what to do. Nothing is working, nothing works. And it's like, here's something that might work for you. This is, I've been sending some of my people who are having a lot of trouble with weight loss resistance. I'm like, try this out. And because when I can see people having success, people that are in that category, they've tried keto, they've tried to do it this way, and it's just not working for them. They're not losing the weight. Then it's, like I said, it's time to pivot. It's time to try something different.
Yeah. And data-driven fasting obeys all the laws of thermodynamics, of energy balance. There's, you still get the nutrients you need. You still need an energy deficit, but it's a way of managing your energy intake, managing your hunger without having to track your calories or track your macros. You just say, okay, when I eat and my blood sugar is a little bit high, I'm going to prioritize that higher protein percentage, nutrient density. And I can be a little bit more liberal if my blood sugars are actually well below my trigger and I've got a lot of hunger and, maybe I just worked out and I need to refill all those energy stores, and it's a good way to fill that. You just timing within your day, you're refueling just perfectly, and it just, it works really well.
Yeah. And so many people do, like, I have to do a 4-hour eating window every day. That's how it has to be.
Because Karen on Facebook had really great results with, XYZ eating window.
Yeah, she
And
has.
that 4-hour eating window turns into an all-you-can-eat 8-course buffet of
Yes.
unlimited binge of everything you dreamt of eating, or high-fat keto with low protein, which we talked about. That just, I stalled out on fasting now. It
Yeah.
just makes sense that approach doesn't work, because the more you compress your window, the more energy dense, nutrient poor you have to make your food to get the energy you need. Your lizard brain's incredibly smart. It's
Yes.
smarter than your consciousness. Don't underestimate the power of your lizard brain to go, maybe I need to eat that and not that. I know, your prefrontal cortex thinks you need to eat the chicken and broccoli and spinach, or whatever your healthy food is, but the peanut butter and the donut and the cream and whatever else is at the back of the cupboard, the cookies are going to look really good at that point if you've pushed it too long.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love that you talked about in the data-driven fasting is Lizzie. You call the lizard brain as Lizzie. You don't want to activate Lizzie.
And if you've gone too long and your blood sugars are low, then you're going to trigger a binge response, and that's the point. You've gone too far. And some people can go for a week and then eat what they deem as healthy at the end of that, but most people can't. So if you're binging, you've gone too far. If you've triggered that binge response, that your reptilian instincts have kicked in to try and save you from yourself, you've pushed it too far.
Yeah. And one thing I see a lot of people that maybe they don't go binge on the foods that they shouldn't really be eating, but they will overeat just the healthier foods. That's what I would do with fasting. I could do a 48-hour fast or a 72-hour fast, and then I would lose a little weight when I would do that, and I'd be really happy with it. But for the next week, my body would demand more of a calorie surplus. Yeah, just a little bit more, just a few more eggs, a little bit more bacon, and it wasn't like food that was necessarily like quote unquote bad, but my body would just say, we're going to need to be eating a little bit, extra this food, even though it's healthier. And I see that quite a bit, the people that they're like, well, the fast, I'm gaining weight and I don't know why. And I'm like, well, because calories, as much as we hate to talk about them, they do exist.
Energy balance is
energy. It is. Yeah, we don't get to thwart the laws of thermodynamics because we're on a zero carb diet.
And we're keto rebels or carnivore rebels. You're still an earthling on Earth with the laws of physics and energy balance. I was going to say, anyway, sorry, forgot.
It's okay. It's all right. It's fun to talk about that, really looking at things. And I love how you have this like scientific eye with just the fasting, the eating windows, and then like you call it, optimizing nutrition, and really looking at our food. And you can you play games with your community as well. You have like leaderboards of people who, are able to design the most nutrient dense diets for themselves.
Nutrient density, and people get really triggered because they want to be at the top. All those type A personalities go, I've got to be at the top of the leaderboard. And, but you don't have to have a perfect score. You just have to improve. Again, it's not all or nothing. It's just improving a little bit from where you were last week. And as you make improvements, your body composition will work itself out. I was going to say, with the data-driven fasting group, we've got a survey in there of, what do you think is the biggest shortcomings of modern fasting advice? And number one, with I think 1,034 responses, is ticked with losing and regaining the same weight over and over and over again. There's just so many people that just are in that cycle of losing and regaining and losing and regaining and not making long-term progress. So with the blood sugar trigger, we get your blood sugar, and then as you're able to meet that blood sugar target before you eat, it just stretches a little bit in front of you each time and gets a little bit lower, and it's progressive overload for your metabolism, so it just makes you wait that little bit longer and drop a little bit more body fat and decrease your glucose a little bit more, and it's a sustainable approach rather than just all or nothing.
That's what I liked about it, is it wasn't like I walk in the first day and I'm expected to get my
No one
blood
eats for a
sugar.
month.
You have to be down to 72 before you can eat
Yeah,
anything at all. I mean, it was
yeah,
like we did the baselining. It's very
yeah.
scientific the way that it's laid out, and I think
Mm,
it's very approachable if you're your blood sugar isn't trending in the hundreds. Like this is a nice
mm,
way to get it down, because we don't want to have, high, we don't want to be pre-diabetic. We don't want to
mm,
be in those diabetic blood sugar ranges,
mm,
but this is a nice approachable way for people to get in and get those numbers down. And then you
mm,
have people after a month kind of take a 2-week break, right?
mm. Yeah, I think the diet break is really important to practice maintenance and maintaining that weight without going, okay, all bets are off. I'm going to binge. We've got a maintenance mode in the DDF app that allows you sort of to have a higher trigger and then practice maintaining. And then if you want to come back for another round, you can go again. But I think having that maintenance, practicing maintaining your weight and eating enough to maintain your weight without always being hungry and focused on not eating, I think is really important as well.
Yeah, I agree. People just get, and that's another mistake I think people make in any of these diet spaces, that they just have to go all the time. They don't take a
Yeah.
break. They don't look at, I have a day every week when I'm trying to do a calorie deficit, just one day a week where I eat at maintenance. And
Mm,
if I'm feeling depleted and I'm feeling like my sleep is suffering, then I'll have 2 days a week at
yeah.
maintenance.
Yeah.
And we don't we don't really encourage that. It's like, oh, we have to just go hard all the
Yeah.
time. So I love that
Yeah.
you take these breaks in between the challenges.
Yeah. Definitely get better sustainable results over the long term if you practice maintaining, because maintenance is often harder than lots of people can lose weight, but maintaining that weight loss is really quite difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, one thing I want to ask
Yeah.
before we kind of close out, this is one thing that I get with people that follow me, because I do a lot of experiments. I like to test things. It's
Yep.
fun for me. I'm
Yeah.
into gut health testing and blood sugar. I just like all that stuff. It's fun. So what do you say to people who are like, you're making this too complicated. This is way overcomplicated. What is your kind of response to that?
Oh, I agree. I had a really interesting chat with Melanie Avalon a few weeks ago, and she's a biohacker that uses everything. And I said, how do you use all these things? And she said, you can only have one thing at a time that challenges your ego and who you are and pushes you. And you can't have too many things push you in too many different directions all at once. You can't try to track your blood sugars and your weight and your calories and your protein and all at once. It just blows up your brain. So you just need to find one thing if you want to move the needle, and just blood sugars are an incredibly useful tool to measure whether you actually need to refuel. You can track your calories, you can track your macros, and in the masterclass we focus on nutrient density and say forget the blood sugars largely, let's focusing on getting nutrients, and that's the priority there. But if you just want to actually move the needle, you need to measure something and manage that one thing. We manage what we measure. So I just think blood sugars, pre-meal blood sugars are incredibly powerful.
I think so too. I love it. Well, I think that's a great response. You don't expect everyone to just go in and measure everything all the time, but this
Mm,
is one thing that I think we can all agree, that getting the blood sugars in
mm,
that good spot and kind of eating around that, learning how to understand your hunger, I think that
mm,
is the cornerstone of any sort of eating plan, whether you want to
mm.
not eat meat. I prefer eating meat, but you know, you could approach this, I know you have some vegetarians that have done your
Yeah.
your plan. So it's not off limits for those people as well.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. Some of the Karen, who's just I think topped the leaderboard for the last two masterclasses, has done it with a vegetarian diet with a whole lot of dairy. She put a lot of effort into it, but she was someone who fasted for 3 weeks at a time under the
Wow.
direction of Jason Fung and Megan Ramos, and was just continuing to gain weight every
Mm.
time afterwards. And when she gives her body the nutrients she needs and then uses blood sugars to dial in when she eats, it's just she's dropping weight. And yeah, it's just beautiful to see. I just love the stories and love forming the relationships with all these amazing new friends I get to meet all over the world.
Yeah, it's very cool. It's very
It's very
cool.
cool.
Yeah, well, this has been, I feel like we could keep talking. My daughter is home. I'm sure you can hear some noises. We had to do this on, usually I do interviews when she's at school because we have a small house and she's pretty loud, but for someone who doesn't speak, she can be very loud. But you're all the way on the other side of the world in Australia. It's Sunday morning for you, Saturday evening for me. So thank you for taking the time out and talking with me. I feel like we could just probably keep going for another hour here.
It's so much fun. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Where can people find you? I'll link everything in the show notes for everyone.
Yeah, check out Optimizing Nutrition is the blog, and then Data-Driven Fasting is the data-driven fasting tool that Sarah's been raving about, and you can find them on Facebook and the World Wide Web through Google. And yeah, I hope people come check it out and join the little tribe that's growing. And yeah, it's great to see the momentum.
Yes, awesome. Well, thank you again, Marty. This has been really fun.
Yeah, thank you so much.